All right, we are back, and I'm here with Reinhard Fuchs, who is the co-founder and CEO of Glacier. Welcome, Reinhard.
Thanks for having me.
And before we talk about Glacier, I saw on your profile that you're the head of the Corinthian Alpine Club Youth and the first climber of the 7 mountains in Tierra del Fuego in Kyrgyzstan. I want to know the story behind that.
Yeah, a couple of stories on that.
Yes.
No, it's about the alpinization, so it's the Alpenvereinsjugend in German. It's something I grew up with. In courses, I've been outdoors for actually my whole life, and I think it's about giving back. Once you do these courses and you are a youth leader, you know that it's not giving back, but actually receiving a lot, input and learning a lot.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, on this one, so I think we have seen it in COVID times that it's essential to be outdoors, to be honest, to not being locked in a room. And we also have seen a lot of mental health issues with teenagers and children during these times saying, okay, I'm not allowed to go outdoors. It's like, okay, Dad, you're not allowed to go there. It's like, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
And all the courses which were cancelled because of Corona, it triggered something. So this was besides all the regular stuff you do, it's very, very important to do the voluntary stuff. That's the one thing. About the first climbing expeditions, well, in German we call it Schnapsidee. So it's like you sit there in the middle of my studies and say, well, we have to do something crazy at the end of the study. And there was a list with, I don't know, crossing a desert and something else. And then it was like, okay, doing a first ascent, like standing on a place where nobody has ever been. And we did a little research online. And back then, in Google Maps, I still remember that, this, like in Tierra del Fuego, which is fireland, there was this cloudy space, so there wasn't even like satellite images from this place. And then we went on writing mails to local people. They said, well, yeah, we don't really, it's not that important to go there and like do the first ascents, although it's just like 100 kilometers away, because it's really rough and it's really a crazy environment. And I'm not sure who have been in Tierra del Fuego from your side. Patagonia? Okay, so it's very windy, it's very bad weather. It's a place normally you don't want to be there, and this is also the reason why it's quite unexplored. And we've been there for almost a month. A lot of sitting in a tent, 7 days in a row sometimes, and you have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And then you have to be ready for the right moment, because we had 2 like sunny days in 20 out of 28 days, which was okay, being ready for the moment, and you have to go up there and climb the mountain.
So it's really a test for your patience as well, right? And your resilience to keep on
It
going.
is. It's a lot about resilience, yeah.
And then is your passion for mountains tied to, Glacier, the name of your company? Is there a connection between those two?
Well, actually, it wasn't me. It was my co-founder came up with the word glacier. I was like hesitant in the beginning. Like, yeah, glacier, because I think I do have another like different connection with the glacier out of my climbing career. However, I think it's a symbol for what is happening, what we are doing to the planet, and what like a symbol for how climate change is advanced already.
And can you tell us a bit more about the vision and mission of Glacier and what exactly you offer?
Yeah, very happy to do that. We are our vision is to bring climate action to the DNA of every company out there. The mission is to educate 100 million employees.
100 million?
Yeah, by
Worldwide.
2030. Absolutely, yeah. It's
2030, okay.
because it's absolutely necessary. We do just have like a limited period of time. We are so if you tell that to people, saying 100 million people is like, oh, you're crazy. Then in the end, but you have to start somewhere. We started with a small team in the beginning, and then they said, well, okay, if we reach like 20 people, 100 people, 1,000 people would be really cool. At our first event, we reached more than 20,000 people, and we so far I think we are at a bit more than 100,000 people we reached with our courses and actions, and it's just a mindset thing. And we are set to scale. Way more like out of Austria and the German-speaking countries at the moment, and then further abroad.
And then, because I read on your website, you have this Climate Academy. What exactly? How can I imagine this courses, this training? Because there's already a lot of different awareness programs, especially in Austria and other countries that focus on climate. But what then differentiates your courses?
Well, firstly, there's a lot of knowledge out there. The problem is either people Google it, or like they see, oh, okay, there's an education course. Is that really fitting to my company? So it's one thing that is very important, the relevance. Is it important for the employees, the company, and can I draw like the most out of it? What I mean with that is the more generic it is, the more, well, like the more shallow it is in a certain way, so that you don't get a lot out of it. The other thing is, it's really about the awareness part. Again, we know the facts since more or less 40 years in climate change, and it's just like the depth of the knowledge increased over the last 10, 15, 20 years with increased technology. We're talking about AI today. However, nothing changed. Actually, it worsened. It got worse, and it's something we act in contrary to what we know. So it's about the mindset of the people and to really touch the people. One thing we have seen is that current challenges in education is that it's not really tempting. Think about a compliance course. Mandatory compliance course in a big corporate is like, oh my God, it's like half an hour, and so on. A lot of sustainability topics or courses have been this way. So they were, well, not really tempting, not really exciting, and also not really concrete. So we try to solve that, and really also go into certain industries and have a high relevance. And also, to be honest, on an on-demand corporate level, there are not a lot of companies doing that in Europe. So a lot of generic content, however, not really specific to companies.
So then what I'm hearing from you is that the content of your Climate Academy is more customized and personalized. Is it then different from industry to industry, or does it depend on the size of the company or where it's located? What exactly is this factor that basically personalizes the content?
Yeah, it depends on the industry, but in general, it is exactly like this. So you have a generic beginning, not saying generic in general terms, however, saying, well, where do we have to start? Why should we act? It's a very basic question, but this is very important to get the buy-in from all of the people. When I mean all, it's not 100%, because you will never reach 100% of the people in a company. It's rather reaching this 20, 30, 40% who make a difference. So if they act in a certain way, it's already an acting majority, as you call it, and then they are like the silent majority will come along. And then you also succeed in the end in convincing the hesitant people. So the generic ones, it's about the why, the mindset. Why should I do something? This is very important, because a lot of people say, well, it's, I'm not that important. Oh, it's the small steps. It's, again, if you set the goal of 100 million people being reached, you don't start with 100 million people. You start with 10, 20, 40, 70. We heard it also on the main stage today about these little steps. And the third point is also very important, why my company should do something. Because there's also a lot of, well, hesitance in saying, well, my company is too little or whatever, like we don't have a lot, like a big corporate footprint. This is also wrong in a certain way because we have all the circumstances and the resources to act differently.
And that brings me to my next question, because you basically go through the channel of corporates to reach 100 million people. But then those people, when they are part of the Climate Academy of Glacier, are not there as individuals, but as employees. So is then the education related to how they can focus on climate change in the context of their work sphere? Because, you know, as an employee, there's only so much I can do. I mean, I can maybe think twice if I really have to print this paper, or if I, instead of flying somewhere on a business trip, I can maybe turn it into a Zoom call. Or does it go beyond the wall of the office?
So here's the thing: if you act on behalf of your corporate, this is calculated to the corporate carbon footprint, which is in the end CO2 is nothing, or CO2 equivalents to be very clear, is nothing else than energy, and energy is money. So the less energy a corporate produces or consumes, the less expensive it is. Furthermore, there are a couple of regulations coming up, so it will be more costly to produce and to consume CO2. Yeah. And our studies have shown, so we did an impact measurement, we're doing it on a regular basis, but during the first 2 cycles of our impact measurement, meaning that we measure the impact of the actions and the courses 6 months after the course, because basically if you ask a person day after the course, like, yeah, okay, yes, I have to change, I will do to change, but nothing happens. Yeah. So it's not really, it's not really realistic to say any impact there, and to state one. But we have seen that there was a clear indication between the corporate environment and also the individual environment. Like I think it was 91% of the people said they also changed their individual behavior. So they bring the knowledge to their homes and try to act differently. Again, step by step. It's not about. It's also science that you don't change overnight and you are a different person, but you change by the habits and especially the environment. With environment, I mean, for example, in a corporate, if you are like saying, well, today we are like resist of eating meat because we go to a different place. It's something else, and it's a kind of reverse peer pressure which is happening, and then you end up in saying, well, this is not that bad actually, and you continue on eating, for example, less meat, or you try to avoid energy consumption, which is not really necessary.
Just as a curiosity, does anyone in your work have similar activities, focus on climate change or being more sustainable? Are there some corporate initiatives where you work, or is it just, not really on the agenda? No?
You have to change that.
Yeah. Because I'm curious, in the end, it's a change of behavior and also mindset, right, as we talked earlier. And for this, I need to be kept accountable, as we all know. If I'm not being kept accountable, there's a certain level of intrinsic motivation to keep going, but then sometimes this dies out. Are you then also working with corporates, or is this something in the future you're looking at to really make sure that people are being kept accountable and maybe also being rewarded?
Yes, it's still tricky, to be honest, because in a lot of cases it's not mandatory to have the corporate carbon footprint measured and like really having a net zero target. Net zero means basically you try to reduce your emissions and avoid the emissions wherever possible, and then you compensate the rest. So you have a certain target and you try to be carbon neutral to a certain way. Holding corporates accountable is something which will be a bigger deal in the upcoming years, but it's happening drastically. So meaning from next year onwards, a lot of more corporates, like the bigger the size, the more eager they have to report their emissions. This is changing quite fast. In 2025, it's the next step, in 2026. So over the next 3 to 4 years, we might see a more rapid change than we have seen in the last 10 years. Solely, and it's a bit unfortunate to say, but solely because of regulations. So it's not really the voluntary basis which is helping, because in the end, the direct connex to CO2 is not there yet. So you can't really say, okay, this is CO2. That's a problem. That's scientifically proven. It's a problem that you say, okay, everything is CO2 here. However, we don't relate to it as CO2. What is a square meter of CO2? We don't know. It doesn't really matter. However, it's the thinking of, okay, reducing what you consume in general, but also not trying to be too drastic here. But in the end, it's really about setting goals for corporates, and we will see a big change here.
Interesting. Christina or Larissa, could you just please also again check next door to see if they can reduce the volume a bit of the conversations? Thank you. Sorry for that. Who are usually the corporates that you work with, or is there a specific sector or size or even structure? Is it more family offices or international offices that approach you or that you currently work with, like that are really aware of the importance of this topic?
I would categorize it in three pillars. Firstly, the corporates who have to do that. Publicly listed companies, for example, we work with the Austrian Railway Systems, A1 Telecom Group, and so on. The big corporates also, big players in southern Germany. The second one are more family-owned companies, because they have this intrinsic motivation, especially from the owners, sometimes even like in their fifth generation, saying, okay, I would like to change something, and I would. Family-owned companies are very often quite sustainable by design, because they have to be a certain continuation of their business. So it's really about the intrinsic motivation. And the third pillar would be about corporates whose employees are really demanding it, and they are certain, we call them the internal champions, like climate leaders, who drive the change within the company. Sometimes a bit tricky with the top management, because they are not super motivated and convinced. However, what we see also is a certain change in terms of the financial regulations, meaning that certain CFOs we know are not 100% convinced from everything what is out there in terms of climate change. However, they have to act because they simply can't get the money refinanced. They have to fulfill certain criteria. So the refinancing of certain investments would be way more costly if they get a bad rating in terms of ESG standards. So this could sum up to millions per year. And lastly, also falling into this category, the HR leaders, VP of HR, personal development. It's an employer branding topic in the end, because it's people demand it. We see a massive problem in filling in all the empty seats from the person who are retiring, and the younger generation can really select their employers.
And I guess it's also, an important factor for the brand overall, right, of how it's being positioned. And are you also working with public sector organizations or academia?
Partly.
Partly, okay.
Public sector is, let's put it this way. So, for example, the city of Linz is an institution we're working with, the Magistrat. The only problem is it's sometimes a bit tricky in terms of sales cycles, to be honest. It's a lot of, so in Linz there was a Stadtsenat Beschluss just on our corporation, which takes months, and it's just a rather like, is it worth from our side investing the time in gaining access to the network? In general, yes, of course we are open. Actually, I had two really nice talks today with public administration officers in implementing, or perhaps implementing our solution. However, our key target group would be more the corporate sector.
And academia, universities, I mean, it's kind of partly, it's public sector as well, but...
Yeah, Not necessarily the university itself. Yeah, well, one client would be the University of Graz. Also the not university sector, but BFE, so Fortbildungs entity. However, it's rather we did a couple of projects together with the BOKU, for example, and where we test certain things, and also we have an experts network in the background, so it's not that we ourselves do the whole content of the courses, because this would be not realistic in a certain way, and we are not expert in all of the fields. This is totally would be very this is what we greenwashing from our side. However, we do have we call them subject matters experts in the background, saying experts in the relevant fields whom we are in contact with and design the courses with.
Interesting. Do we have any questions from the audience? If not, I just want to see. I'll continue with mine. Where do you see as a next step? What is the next big goal for you and your team when it comes to Glacier? I mean, of course, you mentioned the 100 million by 2030, but what's on the roadmap for the next 1 or 2 years?
Well, 2 years is a long time.
1 year.
I'm happy if I can plan 3 to 6 months ahead, because this is like in the startup environment. I mean, I'm not sure if you know the OKR system. We implemented this target system, and we have seen even within 3 months a lot of things are changing. So we are in the midst of implementing the second cycle for the second quarter of the year, and we revised the first quarter, and a lot of things changed since we did that in December. We drafted them. It's definitely so two-sided, maybe product-wise. Of course, delivering content, being more agile in a certain way. Sounds a bit weird for a startup, but you can always be faster and more efficient. Delivering high-class content to the clients, and really transferring our system to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a learning management system, which is called LMS, which is a basic education program where all of the courses are stored, and we transfer that to an LXP, which is a learning experience platform, which is kind of like a the innovation conference, the new stuff out there, where it's way more interactive. You can imagine of a course which is more a game than a video, and this is exactly the level of interaction you can create there. It's really about pointing, choosing like your menu out of different types and saying, okay, this is way like more eco-friendly and this is less eco-friendly. So very, very interactive. And so this is the transitioning to the new platform. And the second thing, business-wise, is definitely entering the German market in a more strategic way, to be honest, because this happened in the course of the month, with referrals from existing happy clients, also with partners who said, okay, we do have a client who is actually waiting for that. We also have clients in Switzerland. The only problem is we can't really fulfill the demand there so far. So we decided to stick to Austria and Germany at the moment, and having a more strategic approach over the upcoming quarters to leverage our network there and have a bigger market share.
Interesting, yeah. Sounds super exciting, especially I mean, that's the advantage of at least having 3 countries that kind of speak the same language,
Absolutely.
German.
But it's not the same mindset, that's the problem.
Okay, that's interesting, because I wanted to touch upon this next, like the mindset. What do you mean it's not the mindset, same mindset?
Business-wise, I think all of you who do business with like different parts in Germany, that's a different mindset in terms of making business.
Yeah.
Second thing is we have seen, and it's also proven by science that in certain studies that climate change is also something which should be shown in a very regional way. Okay. What I mean with that, if like one of the problems happened with the climate communication in the past is that we got pictures with drought savannas and lakes turned into deserts in Africa. How much did it touch you? So it was like, oh, okay, maybe I've been there, but the problem is there's not this clear connection between you and the picture. If we, I'm originally from Carinthia. If I see the Pasterzes melting, it's kind of like, okay, this is my hometown, my home territory. If I see floodings in Radenthein, for example, last year, like massive floodings with casualties, this is a different thing. If you see the Zicksee next to the Neusiedler See drying out over the last summer, this is happening just next to us. And it's not just the temperatures. I mean, we had, I think, 15 degrees over the weekend in Vienna. That's not February as it's supposed to be. And the more regional the examples are, the higher the impact and the relevance is for the people, for the employees, and the more they are willing to act. As long as it's very far away, people say, well, it's not in my backyard, not in my business.
Doesn't touch me. There's nothing really I can do anyways.
Yep.
And then in your courses, because these pictures we get to see a lot in the media, of course, are also kind of like shock, method to shock us on really making us change our behavior or rethink our behavior. Are you using a similar approach in your courses, or what's your approach, when you talk about climate change and make it relevant? Because one thing is to create this very dystopian picture where we then understand, okay, this is not the future we want. That's why we need to change. What is your approach in your education?
There's one approach. However, also statistics say that it doesn't have this high relevance over a longer period of time. So it's shocking. In the beginning, we're like, okay, we have to act, and then it flattens and really say it's gone. It's like, okay, it was shocking. That's it. Think about documentaries. How many documentaries you've seen? Like, wow, okay, this is really disturbing. But then you ate again meat, or you flew again, whatever. It's more about the positive approach, saying, okay, looking at alternatives and trying to explain, but also show like relevant option B's and Z's in acting accordingly, and then having this regional approach, so the context setting, and as well the tools in a certain way, saying, okay, who I'm talking to, what about peer learning, like this grouping again, because if you're there on your own, it's kind of like, oh, that's great, and then my neighbor, I'm not sure if he's really convinced of that. And last time I heard, well, he really is doubting about like electric vehicles, whatever. And it's really this peer grouping and saying, hey, together we can do something and we can change something.
Interesting. What has been the biggest success story for you personally since you and your team founded Glacier?
Personally, I would say to be able to work with stellar people like my team every day on the biggest challenge we have as humans today, besides war, but this is also something which is connected human to human. It's a bit different, like really disturbing and so on. Don't want to comment too much on that, but this is environment and human, and in the end, it's about us being set in the constellation of our planet, and I invest my time in the thing I'm really convinced in, and this is, to be honest, also satisfying enough. And of course, I mean, if we succeeding making people happy, we have 9 out of 10 people of our courses say that it really impacted their lives, This is quite cool, actually. And if you multiply that to more than 100,000 people, change is happening.
Yeah. How do you feel, by the way, on a personal level? Because I asked you before about the corporate world, but on a personal level, have you gotten more conscious about climate change? Are you trying to, incorporate changes in your behavior, or because it's a very massive task and challenge, are you more of the essence? Well, I'm just one person. There's not much I can do. I'd rather wait for the big players, the corporates, to really tackle this because they can make an impact. Does anybody of you want to comment on this? Whether you've incorporated anything in your personal life, or you're all anyways already very conscious? Oh, we have one.
Do something.
Yeah.
And if it is use the train instead of the car, if it is eat less meat, or try to reduce the energy consumption, or get the photovoltaic if you can get it, because it's not very easy.
Yeah.
to get even an offer or somebody who mounts it on your roof. But I think we can all think of what we can do, and some things are easy to do.
Yeah.
And also maybe give you time for other things like taking the train, and you can read something or work instead of the car. And so I think it's also in the personal life to think that to get the positive upside from doing something which could help the climate.
Yeah. Thanks for that. What I find really interesting about your company, because in the end, you're a revenue-based company, right? You're not an NGO, an NPO who's just doing it because it's the best thing to do. And I think that's interesting because so far there has quite often been the notion of climate change is a conflict to doing business while, right, to being successful. But I think you are proving that actually there's a business, you can do both, save the climate and then make money out of it.
Well, this was a very conscious step because I deeply believe that it's really wrong to think in terms of like profitability and like your mission and being idealistic with your purpose. This is, well, in the end, our business, and a lot of businesses out there are the same, should serve us general, like as humans and the planet. And to see a conflict in these two settings is very weird, in my opinion. And yes, it's still out there, but I would never change to like an association and so on. Happy for all of those who are doing it. However, it's also something which should be normal. I mean, we shouldn't have this question anymore in like 2 years' time or even today, saying, well, why shouldn't I do something good and also earn money with it? And in the end, the money we earn as a startup, we invest in the people and all the products and like to grow bigger. It's not about, it will still be a long time until we see something as shareholders. And to be honest, I really don't care. It's not the motivation I started this company. It's really about being out there and doing something for good, and actually also being on the same level. Also, I think this is very important with our corporate partners. If you are like an association, you're always kind of like not on the same eye level, saying, well, yeah, okay, we do some charity. What the hell? It's not about charity. It's about us. And it's fair to do it in this way, but I don't think that's the only way. So it could be also profitable. And maybe one thing about the mobility, you mentioned it beforehand. I've been to the Sustainability Summit in Switzerland last year, and then an editor from the NZZ came to me and said, Rainhard, ja, seid ihr verrückt hier in der Schweiz, in Österreich. What is he talking about? You have this climate ticket for like a really considerable amount of money, and you just have like 100,000 of people. I think back then was like 1,500 people purchasing the ticket, which is ridiculous. And it's really about this mindset change. To be honest, I also like calculated through saying, okay, does it really count? Like, does it really bring the value in the beginning? And since the moment I have the climate ticket, I never had a single thought about if it's proving its value, because it is. It's so convenient, and it's also kind of freedom. Because sometimes you think about trains saying, okay, you're bound to certain timetables. Well, I think I'm bound to a car with certain timetables, because, as you said, you can't really work on the car while driving. You are. I came from Vienna today. Faster by train than with the car. Corinthia, still, let's give us a couple of years for the tunnels. We will be there, and it will be more efficient than the car drive. However, I think this is quite normal. Yes, there's a problem with the last mile, absolutely. Knowing that, like coming from Corinthia. However, it just should be logical to say, of course, this is my transportation method by default. And it's nothing bad on like having certain alternative methods as well. It's just a matter of what is the normal decision.
Fantastic. Well, Rainhard, thank you so much for this conversation. I wish you all the best for Glacier, and I can't wait for you to hit the milestone 100 million, maybe already before 2030. And it's fantastic that you've proven that there is money that you can make out of doing something good as well in the space of climate change, which I think is an example that we definitely need. So thanks a lot for your time, Rainhard, and for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the conversation.
And yeah, let's give him a round of applause. And at 5:30, we have our last panel for today, which also focuses on the human aspect, and it asks the question how to use technology to increase human potential and whether technology helps us to become even more human than we are right now. So at 5:30, we're going to continue with the closing panel. Thank you.